Emerson Pike didn't mean to knock over a stranger's coffee, but when his 5-year-old daughter, Freya, darted toward the toy store in the middle of the mall food court, he lunged after her and crashed straight into a woman holding a venti iced latte. The coffee hit the floor first, then the cup bounced off her designer heels. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Emerson said, breathless, crouching down to help clean the mess with the napkins she hadn't even dropped yet. "My daughter, she saw the stuffed bear in the window and—" "I'm okay," the woman said, looking down at him with a soft, amused look that didn't match the sticky coffee soaking into her white blouse. "It's just coffee." Freya peeked around her dad's leg, her curls bouncing. "Sorry, lady." The woman crouched too, her heels clicking as she balanced easily on them. "It's okay, sweetie. I've spilled worse on myself." She smiled again, warm, not annoyed. "I'm Paige Foster." "Emerson," he said, standing and offering his hand. "Emerson Pike, and this is Freya." Paige shook his hand, then glanced at Freya. "Nice to meet you, Freya. That bear looked pretty cute, huh?" Freya's eyes lit up. "It's huge, it has a crown." "Well, obviously he's royalty," Paige said with mock seriousness. Emerson chuckled, brushing a hand through his thick, dark hair. "I can replace your coffee, or your shirt, or both. Just say the word." Paige waved him off. "Please, this blouse has seen worse board meetings." She didn't say it like she was bragging, but her bag alone probably cost more than Emerson's rent. Still, she didn't seem like the type who noticed. She was easygoing, effortlessly kind. Freya tugged on her dad's sleeve. "Can we go look at the bear?" Emerson hesitated. "Let's give the lady a moment, sweetheart." "It's fine," Paige said. "Go look, I'll be okay." But Freya grabbed Paige's hand instead. "You want to see too." Emerson froze, mortified. "Freya." "Sure," Paige said with a laugh. "Let's go check out the royal bear." She walked with them to the toy store, holding Freya's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Emerson tried not to notice how heads turned as they passed. Paige looked like someone who belonged on a magazine cover, yet she was crouched beside Freya in front of the plush display like a big sister. "This bear is insane," Paige whispered to Emerson as Freya hugged the oversized stuffed animal. "Is it made of clouds?" "She's been obsessed for weeks," Emerson murmured. "But at $120, it's, well, let's just say I'm hoping it goes on clearance." Paige glanced at him, her eyes softening. "You're a good dad." He shrugged, self-conscious. "I try." She was quiet for a second. "You raising her on your own?" He nodded. "Since she was 2, her mom's not in the picture." Paige looked at Freya, who was now trying to convince the bear to sit like a queen. "She's lucky to have you." Before he could answer, Freya turned to him. "Can I just hug him a little longer?" "Of course," Emerson said, smiling. They stood there for a few minutes, watching her. Paige finally turned to him. "You know what? I still owe you a coffee." "You don't owe me anything," he said quickly. "I insist," she smiled. "It's the least I can do for the bear assault." Emerson opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Why not? She was funny, normal, and Freya clearly liked her. "All right," he said, "but only if it's from the cheap place by the escalator." Paige laughed. "You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Pike." They sat at a small table with 2 coffees and a chocolate milk for Freya. Emerson learned she worked in real estate investments and lived downtown. She didn't mention numbers. She didn't show off. Freya was mid-sip when she asked, "Do you have kids?" Paige shook her head. "Nope, but I have a dog who thinks he's one." "What's his name?" "Max, he's spoiled rotten." Freya grinned. "Can I meet him?" Emerson raised an eyebrow. "Maybe we should let Paige finish her coffee first." But Paige leaned in toward Freya. "If your dad says it's okay, I'd love to have you 2 over sometime." Emerson blinked. "That's generous." I think Max would adore her, Paige said, eyes twinkling. And I wouldn't mind seeing you again. His heart thudded. Yeah. Yeah, she said simply. They exchanged numbers on paper. Since Paige claimed she didn't trust herself not to lose her phone in her own purse, and she waved as she disappeared into the crowd. Freya looked up at him. She's a princess. Emerson chuckled. What makes you say that? She has cool shoes and smells like flowers. He tousled her hair. Well, if she is a princess, we definitely don't belong in her castle. Freya frowned, but she likes us. He smiled, though his stomach twisted a little. Yeah, kiddo, she does. But even as he said it, Emerson couldn't shake the feeling. Paige Foster wasn't just anyone. That bag, those shoes, the way she talked about meetings and investments, it didn't add up. And if she was who he thought she might be, he'd be in way over his head. Still, the way she'd looked at him, that was real. And he hadn't felt something real in a long time. The next evening, Emerson was elbow deep in flour when the knock came. Freya dropped her crayon and jumped off the couch, nearly tripping over her unicorn blanket. Wait, Emerson wiped his hands on a dish towel and caught up to her at the door. Let me see who. But Freya had already unlatched it. Paige stood in the hallway, holding a large paper bag with one hand and a leash in the other. Attached to the leash was a golden retriever with a red bandana and the personality of a parade float. Hope it's okay I brought dinner, she said, lifting the bag. Freya squealed, Max. The dog let out a friendly bark, wagging so hard his rear end wobbled. Emerson stepped back, confused. How did you? You said you lived on the east side, Paige replied, stepping in as if she'd done it 100 times. And Freya told me your building had green bricks and a blue door. Took a few tries, but figured it out. You found our apartment based on a 5-year-old's color description. I work in acquisitions, she said with a shrug. I hunt for harder things. As if on cue, Max plopped onto the rug and rolled over dramatically, demanding attention. Freya collapsed beside him, giggling. Emerson stared at the bag in Paige's hand. You didn't have to bring food. I know, she said, setting it on the counter. But you invited me into your world yesterday. Tonight, I figured I'd return the favor. He opened the bag and blinked. Is this roasted duck? Also mushroom risotto, sautéed broccolini, and a flourless chocolate cake. He laughed under his breath. You brought a 5-star meal into a 2-bedroom walk-up. I don't see a problem, she said, pulling off her coat. Besides, I wasn't sure what your kitchen's equipped for. Didn't want to risk burning down the place. I've got a working stove, he said, closing the bag. But I admit, I usually only use the front 2 burners. She leaned against the counter. Is Freya allowed to have cake before dinner? He glanced at his daughter, who was now braiding Max's ears. She's already negotiating bedtime with a dog. Let's not give her more power. Paige laughed. It was low and genuine, like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. They sat around the small table Paige on a folding chair Emerson pulled from the closet, Freya cross-legged on the bench, Max stationed under the table like a shaggy guard. Paige didn't flinch at the chipped plates or the wobbly salt shaker. She asked Freya what her favorite color was this week and listened like the answer mattered. She complimented Emerson's playlist soft jazz from an old speaker and teased him about his dad apron, which he'd forgotten was still tied around his waist. Halfway through the meal, Freya excused herself to go change into her pajamas. Max followed, tail swishing like a feather duster. Emerson poured 2 glasses of water and sat back down. You really didn't have to go to all this trouble. Paige wiped a bit of risotto from her lip. It wasn't trouble. You're not used to places like this, he said, gesturing to the cracked linoleum and flickering overhead light. I've been in worse, she said and held his gaze. Much worse. You don't act like someone who's had it hard. I don't act like someone who's had it easy either, she replied. Emerson studied her. There was something layered under her calm grace, a tightness in her jaw, a stillness in her shoulders. Not fear exactly, but practiced control. Where'd you grow up? He asked. Texas, she said, outside San Antonio. And your family's still there? No, she said simply, they're not. He didn't press, she didn't offer more. Instead, she looked around the apartment. Her gaze landed on a drawing Freya had taped to the wall, a purple dinosaur holding a balloon. I like this one, she said. It's optimistic. Emerson smiled. It's supposed to be Freya's version of a birthday invitation. She wants to throw a party for her stuffed animals next week. Sounds like an event worth attending. I should warn you, stuffed guests outnumber humans 3-1. I've handled worse ratios at galas, Paige said, sipping her water. He tilted his head. So you do that kind of thing? Galas, fundraisers, red carpets. Sometimes, she said, they're part of the job. And what is the job exactly? I manage portfolios, mostly for private clients, but I started my own firm last year. He raised an eyebrow. Impressive. It's a lot of boardrooms, coffee, and damage control. Less glamorous than it sounds. I doubt anything about your world is simple. She gave him a long look. Neither is yours. Freya returned in her pajamas, dragging a blanket and announcing she was ready for story time. Max trotted behind her, clearly settling in for the night. Paige helped clear the dishes without being asked. She moved like someone who didn't mind crumbs or clutter. Someone who chose presence over perfection. After Freya was tucked in, Emerson walked Paige back to the door. She likes you, he said. Freya, I mean. I like her too. He hesitated. You didn't have to come here, not really. I wanted to. He nodded slowly. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They stood there for a beat too long, just enough for the air between them to tighten. Good night, she said, stepping into the hallway. Drive safe, he said, though she hadn't mentioned driving. She turned back. Hey, Emerson. Yeah, hey. I don't care about square footage or labels. I care about how people show up. Then she was gone. He locked the door and leaned his forehead against it. Max barked once from the bedroom, as if to say, she's not like the others. And Emerson wasn't sure if that thrilled or terrified him more. It was supposed to be a casual afternoon, just a walk in the park with Freya and Max, but when Paige arrived in a navy trench coat and sunglasses large enough to hide half her face, Emerson knew something was off. She didn't offer her usual warm greeting. Her jaw was tight, her posture guarded. Freya took Max's leash and skipped ahead, humming to herself. Emerson stayed back with Paige, watching her carefully. You okay? He asked, matching her pace. I'm fine, she said flatly. Then, after a pause, I had a meeting this morning. It didn't go the way I expected. He waited, sensing there was more. She glanced around the quiet park, then finally said, My company's being audited. One of my partners mishandled a deal. Nothing criminal, but it's messy, and since my name's on everything. Are you in trouble? He asked. No, just exposed, she said, and I hate that. They walked a few more steps in silence. A breeze kicked up, scattering leaves across the path. I know what it's like, he said finally, to have your name dragged into something you didn't ask for. She looked over, surprised. You do. My brother ran up a mountain of debt under my name a few years ago, stole my ID, wrecked my credit. I spent months cleaning it up. Did you press charges? No, I couldn't do that to my parents. He disappeared anyway. Haven't heard from him since. Paige studied him. You're a better person than me. I would have buried him. He chuckled. I thought about it. Freya called out from ahead, pointing to a playground. Can we stop, Daddy? Emerson nodded. Go ahead, but stay where I can see you. She ran off, Max trotting behind her like a dutiful knight. They sat on a nearby bench, Paige folding her hands tightly in her lap. Does anyone know we've been seeing each other? She asked, keeping her voice low. I haven't exactly made announcements, he said. She nodded, then leaned back. Neither have I. Is that a problem? I don't know, she admitted. But I'm being watched right now. By clients, boards, the media. If anyone connects me to you, they'll start asking questions. About what? About why I'm not with someone from my world. Emerson didn't answer right away. She turned to him. I'm not ashamed of you. I've worked so hard to build something that's mine. I can't let a tabloid headline reduce it to gossip. He looked at her carefully. Is that what I'd be? Gossip? No, she said quickly. That's not what I meant. But it's how it sounds. She exhaled, frustrated. Didn't come here to argue. I know, he said quietly, but you're asking me to stay hidden. That's not nothing. Paige pressed her fingers to her temple. I've never done this before. What? Dated someone outside your circle? No, let my guard down. He let that sit between them for a moment. Then he said, I'm not asking for a spotlight, Paige, but it can't be your secret either. She nodded once slowly. You're right. Across the park, Freya climbed the jungle gym, laughing as Max barked from below. She's good for you, Paige said softly. She makes you lighter. She keeps me grounded, he replied. Reminds me what matters. Paige looked away. I don't know if I remember how to do that. He turned to her, then let us remind you. Her eyes met his, and for a second, the wall she wore cracked just slightly. Later that week, she invited them to her place for dinner. She said it was just a change of scenery, but Emerson knew it was more than that. When he and Freya arrived, the doorman greeted them by name. The elevator required a keycard. The penthouse opened to floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out across the entire city. Everything gleamed: marble floors, brushed gold fixtures, a grand piano that hadn't been played in years. Freya gasped when she saw the rooftop terrace. It's like a castle in the sky. Paige lifted her brows at Emerson. I swear I didn't coach her. He laughed. You didn't have to. Dinner was already laid out on the long glass table. Roasted chicken, grilled asparagus, and small bowls of truffle mac and cheese arranged like art. Freya ran from room to room like she was in a dream, Max trailing her loyally. Does she like it? Paige asked. She thinks she's on vacation, Emerson said. And you. He looked around. It's beautiful, but it's not what I care about. She moved closer, keeping her voice low. I wanted you to see this side of me, even if it's not the one I show often. He turned toward her. Why now? Because I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter, she said. You were right. I don't want to keep you in the shadows. He studied her face. She wasn't hiding anymore. I don't need any of this, he said, sweeping a glance over the luxury. But I want you, just you. Her breath caught slightly, but she didn't look away. Freya returned, holding a small velvet box she'd found on a side table. Can I open this? Paige crouched beside her. That belonged to my grandmother. Want to see what's in it together? Freya nodded eagerly, and Paige opened the box slowly, revealing an antique locket. She gave it to me when I was about your age, Paige said. Said it would protect me. I'm not sure it ever did, but I kept it anyway. Freya touched it reverently. It's pretty. Paige glanced up at Emerson. Some things are worth holding onto, even if they don't work the way they used to. Later, after Freya had fallen asleep curled up on the couch beside Max, Paige poured 2 glasses of wine and led Emerson to the balcony. The city shimmered below them. Cars moved like stars along the roads. "I used to think I needed to earn love," she said, "by being perfect, by succeeding." Emerson took the glass from her hand and set it aside. "You don't have to earn anything with us," he said, "just be here." She stepped into his arms, resting her head against his chest. "Will you stay?" "Tonight?" "No," she whispered, "in my life." He tightened his hold. "If you'll let me." Below them, the city hummed. Inside, a child and a dog dreamed peacefully. And above it all, 2 people stood on the edge of something terrifying and beautiful, no longer pretending, no longer hiding. The first snow of the season blanketed the city in silence, softening horns and sirens into distant whispers. Emerson laced Freya's boots while she wiggled, too excited to stay still. "Snow angels," she declared, arms already flapping at her sides. "You'll freeze before we make it down the stairs," he said, tugging her mittens snug. "Let's at least get your coat zipped." She grinned, missing a front tooth now, and twirled once as Max barked from the door. Paige had invited them to a charity event that night, something she'd organized herself. It wasn't a gala, she'd clarified, but a winter fundraiser at a children's museum she supported. Family-friendly. No velvet ropes. No photographers, just community. Still, Emerson hesitated at the thought of being on her arm in any kind of public setting. Not because he didn't want to be, he did, more than he'd let himself admit, but because he knew how easy it was for people like him to be dismissed in rooms like that. Freya's laughter interrupted his thoughts as she dashed to the window, nose pressed to the frosted glass. "Are we going to be late?" "No," he said, fastening his own coat. "We're right on time." The museum glowed when they arrived, festive lights strung across the grand entrance, casting golden halos over the snow. Inside, warmth spread through the atrium. Children darted between exhibits, while adults mingled beside hot cocoa stations and hand-painted murals. Paige spotted them instantly and crossed the floor in tall boots and a charcoal coat that shimmered faintly under the lights. She crouched to Freya's level before Emerson could say a word. "I saved you a spot near the puppet theater," she said, "and there's a surprise waiting." Freya's eyes lit up. "Is it a dragon?" "Close," Paige whispered, "but don't tell Max, he's still jealous from last time." The dog barked once in protest and trotted after Freya toward the stage. Paige stood brushing snow from her sleeves. "Thanks for coming." "You sure you want us here tonight?" She tilted her head. "You think I don't?" "I think this is your world," he said, "and I'm still learning to breathe in it." "I didn't invite you to impress anyone," she said simply. "I invited you because I can't imagine being in it without you." A man in a tailored overcoat approached then, crisp and polished with a clipboard in hand. "Paige, the press is asking for a quick soundbite by the donor wall." "Not tonight," she said without looking at him. "Give them the statement we wrote." He hesitated. "They said you're listed as the sole underwriter for the new wing. They're calling it the Foster Pavilion." Emerson's eyebrows lifted. Paige's gaze stayed steady. "Tell them I'm busy." The man nodded and backed away. "You funded a whole wing?" Emerson asked, not bothering to mask his surprise. "I did," she said. "It's named after my mother. She taught in places like this, places that didn't always have heat or working windows. I wanted to build something she would have been proud of." He studied her face. There was no pride in her voice, only purpose. "You do realize you just made every other woman I've ever met look like a weather app." She laughed then, a genuine laugh that cracked through the weight around her shoulders. "You're ridiculous." "Thank you," he said, "for letting us be part of this." She took his hand. "You're not part of it, you're it." Later, while Freya watched a puppet show with Max curled beside her, Paige led Emerson to a quiet corner overlooking the atrium. Below them, families gathered around a massive snow globe installation, children pressing their hands to the glass in wonder. "I used to stand on the other side of rooms like this," she said, "watching people who seemed untouchable. Told myself I'd never need anyone." "And now?" he asked. She turned to him, her voice steady. "Now I know needing someone isn't weakness, it's trust." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Freya made this for you." Paige opened it gently. It was a crayon drawing of a tall woman holding hands with a small girl and a man with messy hair. Above them, a heart floated in red. "She said that's you," he said, "and she didn't ask me first." Paige's eyes shimmered. "I've never been drawn into a family before." "Well," he said, inching closer, "you're in it now." A bell rang in the distance, signaling the start of the closing ceremony. Paige looked down at the crowd, then back at him. "I want to do something," she said, "something real." "Okay." She stepped onto the edge of the platform and lifted the microphone from its stand. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. "I didn't plan to speak tonight," she began, her voice clear and calm. "But I realized something recently. You can build walls to protect yourself, or you can build bridges to connect. I've spent years choosing walls." She glanced toward Emerson. "But someone reminded me that life is better when you let people in, when you let love in." Emerson felt his heart tighten as the room echoed with silence. "So tonight, I want to thank not just our donors or our volunteers. I want to thank the person who made me feel human again." She paused, then stepped down, handing the microphone to an aide. The applause began slowly, then caught like fire. Freya ran to Paige and threw her arms around her waist. "I liked your speech," she whispered, "but I like the drawing more." Paige laughed and held her close. Emerson walked over and wrapped them both in his arms. Later that night, in Paige's kitchen, with Freya asleep upstairs and Max curled beneath the counter, Paige stood barefoot in leggings and a sweater that hung off one shoulder. "I want you to move in," she said. He blinked. "What?" "I don't want to keep saying goodbye. I don't want you and Freya to live in that apartment when there's space here. I want you here, every morning, every night." He studied her. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled her in, hands at her waist. "Then say it again." "I want you here," she whispered. "I want you both." He kissed her then, slow and deep, as if anchoring them to the moment. And in that quiet, snow-covered penthouse, with the city glittering below them and a child dreaming upstairs, something settled. Not just love, but home. A month later, the penthouse had changed in quiet, unmistakable ways. The luster remained, but now there were picture frames on the entry table, Freya hugging Max in the snow, Emerson and Paige with wind-tangled hair on a rooftop, a drawing taped beneath them that read us. The piano had been tuned, and sometimes in the early evenings, Paige would sit there with Freya beside her, plinking keys with uncoordinated glee. Tonight, though, the apartment was quiet. Freya was upstairs with a babysitter a university student Paige had thoroughly vetted, and Max snoozed by the fireplace, paws twitching in a dream. Emerson poured 2 glasses of wine in the kitchen, where a bouquet of wildflowers Paige had picked from a market bloomed in a glass pitcher with a chipped rim. Paige entered barefoot, a navy silk wrap dress catching the light as she moved. Her hair was up, but not polished soft curls had slipped loose around her face. "You look like trouble," Emerson said, handing her a glass. "I might be," she said, taking a sip, but only the good kind. He leaned against the counter. You sure you don't want to celebrate with everyone else tonight? I've been celebrated enough this week, she said. I handed off the final paperwork this morning. The foundation is officially independent. No more board interference, just the mission. He lifted his glass, to doing it your way. She clinked hers against his, to doing it the right way. They drank in silence, content. Outside, snow glittered in the street lamps, another quiet storm rolling in. Have you thought more about the offer? She asked, setting her glass down. He turned to her. You mean running the community programs? Yes, you'd be designing them from the ground up, hiring the teams, building partnerships. She studied him. You'd be incredible, Emerson. He hesitated. It's not the job I'm worried about. What is it then? It's the idea of stepping into something that's yours. You built it. I don't want to be some tag-along who got handed a title. That's not what this is, she said firmly. You'd be earning every part of it, and it wouldn't be mine, it'd be ours. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw none of the guarded control she'd once held like armor. She was open now, unafraid to make space. Then yeah, he said, I want it. She smiled. Good, because the team's already calling you Director Pike. He laughed, shaking his head. You're impossible. I'm persuasive, she corrected, stepping closer. And you belong with us, every part of you. They didn't bother with dessert. Instead, they danced in the living room to a dusty jazz record Emerson had found at a second-hand shop. Paige's head rested on his shoulder, and the fire crackled low behind them. I used to think building an empire would make me feel safe, she murmured, but it never did. What changed? You did, she said. You and Freya, you gave me something real, something worth putting down walls for. You gave us somewhere to land, he said. We've never had that before. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. As the record whispered to its end, they moved together in the quiet, two lives now fully entwined. Later, long after Freya had been tucked in and Max had shifted to the foot of the bed, Paige stood by the window, watching snow fall beneath the city lights. Emerson came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Marry me, he said softly. She turned startled. What? I'm serious. She blinked. You don't have a ring. We're standing in a penthouse built on trust, not diamonds, he said. If you say yes, I'll buy the moon tomorrow. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, yes. He kissed her slow and sure, and when he pulled back, her eyes were full. I don't need the moon, she said, just you. They didn't rush a ceremony. They planned it together, carefully, intentionally. Not because they needed fanfare, but because they wanted to do it right. It happened in the spring, in a conservatory surrounded by glass and sky. Freya walked down the aisle scattering petals in a dress Paige had let her help design. There were tiny stars stitched into the hem. Max wore a bow tie. Emerson waited at the altar, eyes fixed only on Paige. She walked toward him without hesitation, her step steady, her heart open. They said vows they wrote themselves, promises that felt earned and sacred. Afterward, they danced under a ceiling of glass while rain tapped gently overhead. Freya spun in circles with Max trying to keep up, and laughter echoed through the blooming greenhouse. When the night slowed, Emerson and Paige stepped outside, barefoot on the damp stone path, the scent of jasmine and earth wrapping around them. This is it, she said. What is? Everything I never knew I wanted, she said, until you. He pulled her close. You've got it forever. They kissed under the stars, no longer from separate worlds, but one that they built steady, wild, and theirs entirely.